Thanks for joining me. This lab session is entitled Advanced Script Development and Execution Lab. After launching the JMeter IDE, you can use a template option to develop a new test script. It is a way to select from a list of skeleton scripts. Either select the icon at the far left of the menu bar or go to the File pull-down menu and select Templates. Each template shows documentation when you select it. If it meets your desire, use the Create button to insert the template into your IDE to set up a test plan. Let's see how that works. We have JMeter IDE open here, and we have test plan as the only element that's there. That's because I opened it with the new option under File. If I do restart, I will see the same result. JMeter goes away, restarts, and I should see the same simple element test plan. Now, this time we want to do either File or we want to use this icon for templates. Let's do File, Templates. Now I can select from a list of templates and what I want to select is building a web test plan. This option right here, select it, and now I could go to a location online to look at more detail about it if I'm not familiar with it. Otherwise, click the Create button, and now I have that template in place of that test plan. And the name of test plan now is Build Web Test Plan. If I click on here, I still see test plan, but now it has a different name. And nothing is selected. That's its default. So we will leave it as is. And we see where we can expand and see a complete list of elements that are part of this thread group called Scenario 1. If I click on it, I see it's a thread group, and it's set with a scheduler. We'll come back and do something with that. And we have, by default, a View Results Tree listener. So that's the extent of this test script. We have managers, default request sampler, the home page. It has more information. Let's click the button up here to expand everything. And so now under the home page we see assertion. Under the think time we see URT, which is actually a timer. And under page returning 404 we see another assertion. And then finally the view results tree. Now if I wanted to do recording, I could go back to the template and this time select recording. Let's find that. There it is. I have one that's called recording and one that's called recording with think time. Let's just use recording. Click on it. Again, I see where I can go online and look at more detail. I'm just going to go ahead and create. And it gives me another pop-up which I can respond to with more different detail if I want, but I'm going to use this example site and recording output file is recording XML. That's okay. That's a default. And scheme is HTTPS as opposed to HTTP. And I'll go ahead and create. It says there are test items that have not been saved. Do you wish to save before creating a test plan from selected template? Let's say yes. And we're going to call it, we're not going to put it in the templates. We're going to put it in the JMeter scripts folder, and it wants to call it URT. Let's leave that name. We could give it some other name. Let's call it that, URT. Okay, now we look at this script again. It's still the one we had. It still has the same thread group, but notice that there's a recording controller inside the thread group, and the view results is underneath. There's a new view results underneath HTTP test script recorder. So this element and the recording controller element, those are what were needed to start recording events for this particular script. Before, it had no events, and now it does, or now it is positioned to do so. We see that there are two elements that are variables that have been created that are over here in the user-defined variables under test plan. One is called host and one is called scheme. So we see the value HTTPS is identified with a variable, and so is the example.com URL has the variable host. So now this script is positioned, it's been merged, it's positioned now to be able to record. I would actually go to this recorder element here, test script recorder, and this is where I would start the recording process. I can point to where I want the recorded events to be recorded, and in this case, test plan thread group recording controller. And I can go to the request filtering and note that there are some information there. It says URL patterns to exclude. Those have been added. And I could also URL patterns to include. I could add, if I scroll down, suggested excludes. And do I see it? Yes, it's all this final line here. So all of this information now is in here to collect any information that meets any of these items for exclusion, not inclusion, but exclusion, so that the recorded data of events or list of events are not so voluminous. It defaults to port 888. I can change that to whatever port that I want to use in the browser that I'm going to use. All right, I'm not going to actually go through the recording step. I simply wanted to show the merging of a template to an existing template, how that works. All right, that concludes this portion of the lab. Be aware that the recording and bean shell templates add to existing test plans. In other words, those options merge with the existing test plan instead of overlay. Let me launch JMeter and demonstrate using a test plan with a follow-on test template. By default, a test plan script element shows at launch. No settings on the test plan element is required. You can leave that element and select a template. I'm going to select the Web Test Plan template and click the Create button. Now all the elements needed for running a simple website test is available. Before I do, let me step through what was generated. The test plan element was replaced with what you see. Without expanding the Scenario 1 element, what you see is a test plan, a thread group, and a listener. Upon expanding the Scenario 1 or a thread group element, we can see some configuration, controllers, samplers, timers, and assertion elements. If I expand here, you see the assertion elements, the timers, and another assertion element here, plus the view results tree reporting element. Starting from the thread group, the test is defined to ramp up 5 seconds, or 5 users, in 5 seconds, and run the test for 1 minute after a 5-second delay. Notice the delay setting down here. And notice also here that the loop count is not set to a number, it's set forever. And that goes along with the duration. So the duration is what's going to stop the test once we meet 60 seconds. And I'm going to change that to actually 30 seconds. And so once that occurs, then this will be met. It will no longer want to run. There are cookie and header management settings over here. And here we're just taking the defaults. Nothing magical there. And remember also, speaking of default, the request default, it's set to use the example.org website, which is just a test website that we're going to make use of. We have the home page, which is an HTTP request, but there's no URL specified because it's going to take it from the request defaults element. There is an assertion. We're checking to see in the body of the data, do we see example domain? If we find that, then the assertion will pass and the test will complete successfully. We also have a think time. We called it 1 second. Why? Because we have a sub-timer element that's designed to provide a maximum of 1 second, or an offset of 1 second, 1,000 milliseconds. And then we have page returning. We're checking for one that has example.org/test. If we get that, and the assertion says it's 404, we did not find it, could not find it, then that will pass. So that's okay. And then finally we have the view results tree, which will show us the data that has been passed to and from, as well as what events occurred. All right, let's run this test. Save it. We'll give it a name. That build web test plan, let's go with that. And now we're ready to run this test. We click the start button. We see it hit the home page. It's doing it several times. Remember what the thread group said? We're going to run for 30 seconds. So we still see the stop signs, icons are visible. I'm going to go back to the view results tree, scroll automatically. All the way down here, we can see quite a few events, and we've stopped. Okay, let's see what happened here. The request, example.org, the response, let's look at the header, the sample result. We see that the response code, message, connect to example, failed connect, timed out. Okay, so we were at the end of the test, the 30-second mark is what actually happened. Let's look at, here's the home page of the first time. We can see some statistics, and we got a good response code. Okay, request, we sent that, the header, you can see the information there. In the response data, what we got back, nothing earth-shattering there. And what else do we want to see? Did we ever get a page returning 404? We can see those. Let's just pick one. And we see that it did return a 404, not found. So it accepted that. If that wasn't a 404 after home page, then it would have failed, and the test would have failed. Now what we'll do is clear the results. I'll change the default request to identify Google as my target, and then change the thread group settings, users and ramp to 1, and turn off the scheduler and uncheck the forever loop. Let's do that. Want to use Google this time. Cookie manager is fine, header manager is fine, home page is fine, assertion, I don't expect to find that value, so I'm going to change that to a response code of 200. Oops. 200. I'll leave the timer in there. That should run the same way. We'll find out. Review results tree. I want to clear out. Sorry, clear. And I'm close to. I suppose I wanted to see response time or throughput or latency metrics. I can add 2 reports from the listeners list, like the aggregate and view results in table. Let's do that. Add listeners. Got the view results tree. Let's do the summary report. No, the aggregate report. They're similar. And one more. Add listener and view results in table. Okay, so now we have the view results tree, view results in table, and aggregate report. That should be enough for now to run this test. If everything works correct, let's go to the thread group, and we want to change that to 1, ramp up 1. We want to set, we'll just set that to 3 and turn off the scheduler, and so none of that will come into play. All right, let's save that, and we're ready to test. So the report should provide useful information. Hopefully you can see enough here that will provide a good starting point, and your test plan can build from there. We should be done. If we look at the view results, we can see that we did get that page returning in, and it was not found. So that's good. The home page, we can look at we're looking at the response data, the response body, and quite a bit of data that was returned. But we didn't do any checking for data. We simply did an assertion check up here for a return code of 200. And of course, if we go back to the report, click on the sample results, we see that we did get a response code of 200. And if we can look at the reports, the aggregate report shows us the home page and page page returning. We did those 3 times each, and we got an average response time for the home page of 375 milliseconds, and for the not found condition of the page returning, 24 milliseconds. Small amount of data on return, and We look at the view results in table. We see those 3 each: home page, return, home page, and so on. And the status was good in all cases. We see the detailed report, total amount of bytes that returned for the home page. Nothing more than a rough packet that came back on the page not found conditions. And the latency and connect time we see. My time is ended for this session. I thank you for yours. Join me in the next video.